This is Radical Spatial Futures, a project on spatial resistances, collective speculations and radical imaginations. You're listening to Confronting Radical Imagination, a conversation series asking, what is the role of spatial practice in contexts so deeply conflictual that alternatives are not even considered possible? In this reflective journey, I confront spatial practitioners from around the globe with the notion of radical imagination. What does it mean to them? Is it valuable? Is it an inherent part of design and spatial practice? What is the role of imagination in wider processes of change? The conversations are structured around a series of material agents, images, drawings, and quotes amongst others, which are carefully curated from the practice's past work. In this conversation, I am joined by Marianna Martinez Balvanera to discuss the work of Cocina CoLaboratorio and to together explore how the kitchen can become an arena for imagining and enacting alternative futures. Cocina CoLaboratorio, or Collaboratory Kitchen, is a transdisciplinary collective based in Mexico that gathers creatives such as artists, designers, and architects, farmer community, scientists, and chefs around the kitchen table to exchange knowledge, design, and take action towards sustainable food futures. For them, the kitchen is a social place, a common place to gather and to connect. It is a place to share not only food, but stories, ideas, aspirations, and initiatives. It is also a testing ground for ideas that conciliate land restoration, food production, and better livelihood in urban and rural areas towards more sustainable and just futures.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you, Lara?
Fine, you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course, I'm in a cafe.
Yeah,
so
no worries. It's okay.
Where are you now?
I'm
London?
in Sheffield.
Oh, in Sheffield. Okay.
Yes, it's like a North England, basically, close to
Okay.
Manchester. Yeah.
And you are from there?
No, I'm from
Or where?
Cyprus.
From Cyprus.
Yes.
Okay.
Where are you now? Are you in Mexico?
I'm in Mexico City.
Okay, so it's
I'm in
really early in the
Mexico
morning, isn't it?
City. It's 10.
It's 10. Okay, 10 is acceptable. Yes.
It's acceptable.
Yes.
It's okay time. Yeah.
I guess I'll start.
see.
Yes. Okay, so I will be sharing my screen sometimes while we talk
Okay.
because I do this thing that I prepare before an interview. I think you'll probably be able to see it soon. And I have like a grid of images that I have found from your practice, etc. And I
Yes.
use them as prompts so we can have a conversation that is not just us talking, because I'm like a visual person. And I think I'll tell you just a couple words about my project and why I'm doing this before we start, so you have an idea of what I'm like sort of interested in and what I'm looking at. So I'm from Cyprus, as I told you, and this is, I don't know if you know anything about Cyprus, it's okay if you don't, but it's a very contested territory that is a small island that is divided in multiple parts, basically, because of years of colonialism, centuries. And in a way, growing up there, it kind of very much affected what the things that I'm interested in, but especially when I was studying architecture, like around 10 years ago, I got involved with this intercommunal sort of group of researchers and practitioners that did a lot of work that was about finding ways to use the tools of like spatial practice and architecture or of research to create spaces where people that would otherwise not like talk to each other would be around the same space and discuss issues that were very hard. And I think from that experience, I started being very interested in this sort of, conflict, also spatial practice and things like that, kind of moving from architecture away. And I think at some point when I started framing this PhD, radical imagination and imagination in general was not a part of it, but I came across this term. And it was particularly interesting for me because in a way I understood what all of these things that I felt, and I saw what they meant and why this work was valuable. And what I'm trying to do in this project is to talk with a lot of practitioners that do different sorts of work around the world and discuss their work and reflect on their work and see if imagination has anything to do with it and if it's valuable in any way. So I'm sort of testing this hypothesis, if that makes sense.
Can I ask? Sorry,
of course.
Can I ask what you understand for radical imagination?
Yeah, I can tell you now. I was gonna get to it later, but
Okay, sorry.
No, it doesn't matter. In a way, for me, it's this idea that First of all, it's an ability that you can understand that something that is happening right now is not as it should be happening and things should change. So the present is not working as it is working right now. There is some sort of oppression or anything that it shouldn't be like this anyway. It depends on the context what that means. And then it's about having the ability to understand and dream of different possibilities for the future, but also thinking about the past at the same time and how our roots and our practices and our knowledges come into that. But also, I think the most important thing for me is not something that you can do individually, so it's a collective practice and experience that comes by being with people and sharing and having encounters, not just with people, but also with the earth and with the land and with everything. So that's sort of what it is for me. I don't know if that makes sense.
Makes sense, makes total sense.
Yeah, so just, okay, that was sort of me, my introduction. So going back sort of to your project, I sort of want to start from the context and kind of understand better maybe what conflict or contestation or contested territories means for you. So if I'm not mistaken, you mostly work in these three territories in Mexico, but you also have a strong connection with the Netherlands and with institutions there. And I think I have an idea of what I could call conflict or contestation in these territories, but I sort of want to hear from you instead. How could you define, or what does it mean in the everyday life?
The conflict or contestation within these territories that we
Yes,
work in.
yes.
And does that have to do more with like the drivers of the practice, or like, or
It
how, what
can be
drive
as
what
well. It can be as
yeah,
well. So it's sort of gonna get connected. But I sort of want to also know what is the everyday life of these
yeah,
places that you are sort of trying to
yeah,
intervene in or situate
yeah,
yourself in.
yeah. Okay, let me think about it for a second.
Yeah, no worries.
I think, bueno, yeah, I think contestation actually happens in many different levels, no? It's not like one thing. It happens, of course, I mean, the driver to our project has to do with like the kind of the spatially, let's say, the contested nature of agriculture in space and also in relation to nature and biodiversity. I think that's like one of the main drivers, right? So, in opposed to maybe like agroecological practices, no, the current agricultural system, the industrial system, is always in contestation with the land, no, because it's always expanding and it's always also taking more land and more biodiversity. And I think for us, that's like the main driver in general, let's say, no? And also understanding what we can do as like spatial practitioners or artists or scientists to rethink or to understand actually these conflicts and also kind of act upon them, no? And in particular, I would say, or let's say, okay, let's go back to this thing of like having a relationship with the Netherlands. There is also like a contestation there, I would say. I think that's like the relationship with the Netherlands has to do with more like personal things. Like I was living in the Netherlands for very long, but also I do think that there's a more global approach to actually that things that are happening in a local scale, no, that are being contested in a local scale, are also part of a global dynamic, no. So I think it's also very interesting to understand whatever we're doing in relation or in conversation with other places of the world, like for example the Netherlands, that even though in their approaches there's like a massive difference to the reality of Mexico, there is a relationship because there's like exports, imports, but there's also like a conversation about global climate crisis, no, about rethinking food systems. So I think like the conversations even there are really important in a local scale in Mexico. No? Yeah.
No, I just was gonna ask you, what do you think the Netherlands allows you to do, or like when you were there, did you feel like you had to
Yeah.
be in Mexico? Because I keep having this conversation with myself and with other friends
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
live
Yeah.
away from the context that we are sort of trying to engage with.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, it was always very important that whatever I was doing there would somehow benefit or reflect like my country, no, not because of a nationalistic thing, but more because for me it was important to also like take the resources of like the global north and then also try to kind of localize them to the context here. um, and and also I would say that like there, like I understand some of the conflicts in the Netherlands, and of course there's like some questions about climate and like social injustice and whatever, but it's not my context, so I don't fully understand it, and also I don't fully engage with it. So yeah, I think for me it was important to kind of think about the main concerns, but then also understand how does that reflect in Mexico. And actually, now I'm unlearning a lot because there's a lot of talk about sustainability and about like spatial justice and like socially engaged practices in Europe, but that's not the same. They're like bigger concepts that actually, when you put them in the ground in Mexico or in Latin America, you will always have to adapt or unlearn them even, and also try to understand other perspectives that are more from here, no,
Yeah.
that have different issues, like that food is always political, no, whereas maybe in the Netherlands the talk about sustainability and food is not so political, but that's because the territory is not under pressure, no, and under like this
There's no sense of
um,
urgency in a way.
there's a sense of like a global
Yeah.
urgency, but I think there's not like a relationship with like frontline effects of climate change, for example. So here we also we talk to a lot of people, no, like farmers that are losing their crops because of drought, because of ¿cómo se llaman? Sorry.
You can say in
Because
Spanish, and I'll understand.
inundaciones. Inundaciones, when it
Yeah, I
rains a lot.
understand. Yes.
When it rains too much. Floodings. Uh-huh.
Floodings. Yes. Okay.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So due to flooding, so the climate is changing and is affecting the food systems, no, and the viability of producing food. One, but also there's a lot of pressures as well, no, like gentrification or like extraction, or nowadays even like cartels that are um, asking for money for like the ¿cómo se llaman? They ask for some sort of tax
Okay.
for like hectares, no?
Okay.
So like in the avocado industry, this is like very it's very common. So actually, food is very much engaged in other dimensions of conflict that in the Netherlands is not. No, so I think that's one of the main things that I've like learned in navigating these two worlds as well, and understanding that things that we work in Mexico have to evaluate much more layers of conflict and no,
Yeah.
contestation in social dynamics, in politics, in ethical perspectives as well. No,
Yes.
we also have like the ethical perspectives of okay, whose knowledge is, for example, the knowledge of recipes or the knowledge of seeds, and are we maybe as people that are working from the outside coming into a community, do we have ownership to that? No, do we need access to that? How do we get access to it? What do we do with that? How do we talk to people about it? And who we're communicating this to and for who? No, so then there is also like this ethical perspective, because Mexico is such a diverse country, and also like very different social class, and they're very different privileges, and so we need to also be very aware of that, and very aware of our
Yeah.
position, and very aware of the position of our project in a place, no, and what we're producing and how we're producing it. So that's another layer of
Yes.
contestation, which makes it like even more complex here. Yeah.
And how do you deal with all of this complexity through your practice? Like, what's like usually your approach? How do you go about it?
I will become a bit crazy. No,
No, that makes
no,
sense.
no. I think first of all is really like listening,
Mm-hmm.
no, and I think we started the project in relationship with the Netherlands,
Mm-hmm.
and actually we started this project or this process with a very kind of like hands-on approach, like let's
Mm-hmm.
make, let's do, because if things need to
Okay.
change, they need to be changed now.
Mm-hmm.
Like very, it's like climate crisis,
Yeah.
we have to act. But we understood that exactly in navigating a complexity, you need to be more open to listen,
Mm-hmm.
and to understand and to create more valuable relationships
Mm-hmm.
and respect, and care, and also have these infrastructures of care first, to really understand, to really like try to be as conscious as possible with the complexities.
Mm-hmm.
And then from this very strong base, we slowly act, and we slowly, and no, and we constantly question what we're doing, and then we act again,
Yeah.
and then we question, and then we act again. Because I think that like navigating such a complex environment or situation, if you just kind of like follow intuition and do things, then you might as well, make it worse,
Yeah.
or intervene in a way that is not the best, no, or
Mm-hmm.
no, or people don't feel part of this process, or maybe there is like a fine line of something that you already touched, and then it becomes dangerous, no, for some
Yeah.
reason. So we have really learned to 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 be slow, no, to be slow, to think, to act, to think again, and like this. And I think for us, it's the it's the way that we found that it makes more sense to navigate complexity.
I mean, that makes sense. It's like a process of, I guess, reflecting all the time, not just doing, but like stopping and taking some space
Exactly.
and some taking some steps back. But I think I also see, I don't know, a lot of your work and like the tools that you're using, or the way that you do things, and I'm sort
Mm,
of sharing again. But like, I
yeah.
think for me, it's three things that I see in your work that are always come out, whatever project you're doing. It's the kitchen sort of as a
Yeah.
space. It's not a space that is only to cook, but it's a space to share knowledge, to talk together, to listen, to do things together,
Yeah.
and to learn from each other. And then it's a
Right.
table that is obviously a part of the kitchen, but it might not be. That is very important. And I feel like it has a very central space in your practice.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then I think what I found interesting is also the idea of the radio, because perhaps it has to do also with what you just said, that is about waiting and listening and collecting all of
Mhm.
these stories and these narratives.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I sort of, I don't know, I see these three things as kind of your main tools that you use
Yeah.
to collect or to do this thing that you were describing, but I don't know if I'm off.
Yes. No, no, definitely, definitely. And I think that's where food plays an important role, no? Because food is like the ultimate connector, no? And it's multidimensional, it's complex, but at the same time, it's very relatable. It's also very enjoyable, it's pleasurable. It also brings the opportunity to care for each other, or to like portray hospitality. So it doesn't matter also like who you are, where you're from, and what is your background.
Yeah.
You will always want to eat something nice, right?
Food is food, yes. Yummy
and you
food
will
is yummy
always
food.
and you will always want to eat with some, like, and share that moment with someone. So I think that's why the kitchen table, and the kitchen itself as like an experimentation space has been really crucial um, to again to understand the complexity, to hear the stories of like the complexity of food or foodscapes, but also to provide a space for different relationships to happen, no? Or different encounters to happen, and that are not only kind of like focused on a one direction, one dimension, but it's also it can also be, not ¿cómo se llama? Not intellectual,
Mm-hmm.
no,
Yeah.
like by ideas,
Mm-hmm.
but also it can be
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sorry.
It's okay, no
Sí.
worries.
Pero it can also be related to the body, no, or
Yeah.
like to the senses.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why exactly food is like our main space, because also when we were starting this project, we were thinking like, okay, how are we going to approach all this complexity, and how
Yeah.
are we going to approach all these like political, ethical, biological, historical,
Mm-hmm.
identity sort of themes, because they're all like super big, no? And food actually englobes everything
Mm-hmm.
and makes it super, yeah, and it makes it like really um, kind of like a soft material also
Yeah.
to go slow and to build relationships
I
there.
mean, I might come from a very different part of the world, but I think culture and food related is something very universal also for a lot of
Yeah,
different places.
yeah,
In
yeah.
Cyprus, for example, I was very touched looking at photos and images of your work because it reminded me of villages in Cyprus as well. Because
Hmm.
we have this, it's something that is very important to our culture is a common oven that is in the village. Because
Hmm.
years ago, when people didn't have ovens in their houses, what they would do is make big trays of food and bring them to the communal oven that was usually at someone's house, or outside the
Hmm.
church or something like that, and everyone would cook their food together. And this was sort of always a cultural activity that brought people together, especially in very hard times. So it was like their social gathering space and the way that they interacted with each other. So I think your work made me reflect a lot about how food is important in my context, and also how it
Hmm.
has to do with conflict. So I found it extremely interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And do you want me to talk a little bit about the radio
Yes.
also?
Mm-hmm. Why
I
not?
yeah, just I mean, the radio is also a mechanism for that,
Mm-hmm.
no? To listen for listening, but also is like we call these spaces like the kitchen or the table or the radio, we call them arenas,
Mm-hmm.
like arenas for experimentation and exchange,
Mm-hmm.
because they are these kind of tools or props,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like to create a situation for an exchange to happen in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So, the radio is, it's not the intention of like actually having a radio station and
Mm-hmm.
like, but it is just a tool for listening to each other and to record stories. And then we've done some presentations of those like audio stories in public spaces, in
Mm-hmm.
shops, no? So also like people listening to their own stories and their own voices. I think that's been kind of, yeah, that has been a very beautiful process, because then, when you hear the stories of your place, your own place, it kind of becomes more evident, no? Things start to become more evident in
Mm-hmm.
you, and also it kind of passes from the daily life, very transient kind of information, or just like something that you carry within your body on your mind,
Mm-hmm. And that
and
you
then
do
it
every
becomes
day
some
something
hand you do every
important.
day, and then it
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like becomes something. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember one farmer once told us, because we did like a little podcast about his seeds, and he was talking about why it's important to take care of native seeds, native
Mm-hmm.
corn seeds. And then he heard his audio and he started crying, and he said like, now, like, I always talk about this because I'm crazy and these are all my own like crazy thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
but now you made me transcend, so more people will listen to this message and listen to this story, and they will listen to my craziness, but I have transcended through you. So it doesn't matter if I die tomorrow, people will hear my story,
Mm-hmm.
and that was super beautiful, that like he he would see the potential of his own voice through
I
that.
think that's something that is a very cool distinction that I find in many projects. That is like, are you trying to empower someone, whatever that means? which usually
Mm-hmm.
when I hear people say that they want to empower some community
Yeah.
or something, it sounds to me like that community doesn't have power and somehow I
Exactly.
will give them
Exactly.
power, which cannot
No.
happen. But this
No.
is more about letting them, showing them in a way what they
Exactly.
have and what they can do, and sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
bringing their voice and making it stronger in a way, and
Yeah.
other people
Yeah.
listen to it.
Exactly. Exactly. It's about also like putting things in a pedestal, right? And putting things in the center, and exactly. I also don't identify with the term empowering someone. We talk a lot about agency, but we talk a lot about collective agency. Um, we are not giving agency,
Of course.
but we are facilitating these tools, meetings, or processes that allow for people to find their own agency, no, but also to find and gather and collectively build collective agency. And that doesn't it's not only transmitted to the community, but also to the scientists that are working with us, no, agency to act differently in the ways that science is working, no? Agency to the artists that are working with us also, to understand, that there is a way that, through arts or through food, they can also be generating other things in conversation with others, no? And it doesn't have to be so individual. So I think there's like a lot of questioning of how we structure work and how we structure research and how we structure action, that I think agency has like a very big part on, like, you know finding the inspiration and the willpower to change and to move or to question, no. So that's like we yeah, we communicate more that, because we are not, coming to a place and, you know telling people, okay, now you can
Yeah.
be empowered. Pues no, o sea, it's very difficult.
Yes.
It's also like people have their own power and they're amazing and they have so much power,
More
no?
than us most
And
of the times, yes.
yes, exactly. So I find it sometimes a little bit racist to say like a white person empowering some
It's
indigenous
a
community.
very wide saviorism kind
Very
of
much.
vibes,
Yeah.
yes. There's two things that I don't want to forget. One thing was that I found interesting is that this relationship that you have with the university,
Mm-hmm.
I see many times in other practices, it might be that the practitioner, for many different reasons, has like a double life as someone doing this sort of actions and projects in the territory, and then also
Mm-hmm.
working in the university. But I see more work, your more work as someone that tries to also change in the university and change the way that that the university does research and the
Yes.
interaction between these two things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
Definitely. Yeah, I think one of our call to actions when we started this project was how to bridge, um, gracias, how to bridge between universities, or like these kind of spaces, like knowledge holder spaces and research spaces, and communities that are on the front line of, like climate catastrophes, or yeah, I don't know, which are also producers of food that sustain many people, no? And also understanding, like, in a world of today, we cannot allow for, no, for science kind of situation,
yeah.
no? So we've researched a lot. Yes, there needs to be more research, but we also need to find somehow actions that direct us in the right path, or no, in the path that is more suitable for a place or in a group of people in a transition to another kind of world. And scientists hold so much knowledge, but also they hold a lot of methodologies for researching a place. Um, but it's usually, no, within a university, within a study. It's quite extractive as well. So maybe a scientist is in a place and taking data and then writing a thesis and then never coming
Go
back and
back.
then handing over the thesis, and then the people are saying like, okay, what are you giving me?
Yeah, what
No,
is this?
I'm going to put it. I'm going to make fire with
Yeah,
this. I don't care.
100 pages of paper that mean nothing.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And most a lot of things are in English or like in super complicated language and like with graphs. So yeah, when we started this project, the main driver was to allow for scientists that had been researching this rainforest area in Loma Bonita in Chiapas to think about the research practice in a different way and to force them a little bit to engage with the communities of the territories they've been researching for so many years. And also that they were concerned and they were writing about, like, okay, the rainforest is under threat because of monocultures. Then, what do you do? Do you just research and like accumulate all this data? Or do you put it into something that will make, that will make a change? So yeah, I think we have translated this desire and this we've tried to build systems around this to engage with students, especially, and also researchers, um, to do science in a different way, to think always in reciprocal relationships, to not think that you're only taking data for yourself, but that the data that you are producing is part of a collective investigation of something that needs or has to be investigated, that people also feel that is relevant, and that also in the process there's like some different learning spaces, no exchanges. Okay, how do I see this? How do you see this? Where do we go? What do you think is important to research? And then also, like, ultimately, or I think within the process, that's why we also try to kind of work with artists sometimes, or like with the food, and to like engage beyond, like, I'm the researcher, you're the person that is being researched, or your land is the thing that is being researched. Creates more profound relationships, no? And
Yeah.
that's why food has worked very much. And also, by the end of a research, or when we're kind of like wrapping up, understand also like what is going to be a return, no? So you have all this data. Okay, what are we going to do with that?
Yeah, where does
Are
it
we
go?
Where does it go, no? And I think it's not only important to do that, but also like to do like a learning exchange process throughout, no? But also, okay, what do you do with all the material that you've gathered, and how do we put it in practice, or how do we put it in some sort of thing that is important for people? And we have been thinking a lot about that, and prototyping different models. And sometimes some scientists are super open for this, and they're really like, yes, I'm going to engage, I'm going to be engaged in collective work, and I'm going to cook, and I'm going to do that, I'm going to talk to people. And some are not, no? And some want to do their own methodologies by the book, and are like, why are you questioning me? Why are you telling me, like, let's do different methodologies? I need to get this data, and for me to get this data, I need to do this methodology very well, and otherwise my peers at the university will say something, and it's not like it's not scientific enough. So at the beginning we were like, oh my god, we have to restructure and like kind of smash the smash
Yeah.
the academic structure. But I think we also learned, again, no, to go slow and listen, that it's best to do a process hand in hand, and like a reflective process, and um, not so much like reactionary, but also like to acompañar, to accompany, no, this process. And I think it has worked. It has worked well, and I think many scientists that have come through the project have completely shifted the way that they saw their academic practice. No?
Yeah, I guess you sort of tell them, you are not the only expert here. There's other people that are experts,
Definitely,
and then
definitely.
it depends on the person and how open to that they are, uh, to sort of go with it and see that there's other people that have knowledge that is valuable. I guess, how
Yeah,
do the people in the communities react to this? Like, suddenly there's, because I'm sure, I don't know if it's the case in the areas that you're working, but many times these territories that have this sort of issues, they are over researched, by a lot of people from universities, and you end up just having even students and groups coming, doing work, doing research, and then leaving, and people start getting tired
yeah,
of them.
yeah,
Uh, so,
exactly.
so I wonder, how did the local community sort of
See,
perceive
uh-huh.
you, or these scientists that were coming in, or.
Yeah, yeah. So what? Yeah, I think it depends on the three sites
Mm-hmm.
because they've had different levels of intervention of
Mm-hmm.
academia. But let's say for Chiapas,
Mm-hmm.
uh, as I said, one of the main drivers was to create this like bridge between people that were working there for a long time. So the communities were already quite sick of seeing scientists just coming and going and not knowing what. So
Mm-hmm.
then when we started this project and we started cooking, by the end of these pilots, people were saying like, okay, you know, I think
That's
we we
different.
we we want yeah, and we also we want to see this. You know, we want to see a university that is engaged with us. No, that if you have resources, you know, it can be economic, but it can also be material, or it can also be like there's all these students that have all this knowledge. Like you can come and give workshops and engage with the children and this and that. So I think in that sense, like the community was very clear to say we are sick of scientists that are coming and not leaving anything.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do something about it. Let's
Okay.
change it. And actually, like our project was a response to that. Um, and in Oaxaca, in Santo Domingo, it's it's a it's quite a new thing that there's been research. I mean, there has been a few researchers, but not as much as like because in the rainforest is the rainforest, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like a hotspot for
Mm-hmm.
biodiversity. Everybody wants to research that. And in Oaxaca, it's more, I would say, in an anthropological sense. So there has been a lot of research, like historical research, cultural
Mm-hmm.
research, anthropological. So a lot of talks with people, and I think there is also this idea of people are coming in and asking, and then like I didn't see anything. You know, this person left, and she said that she was doing like a book for in Zapotec language, and she never came back. No? So we are trying to be very careful with. We're trying to be very careful with the process in which we insert students and researchers into the process. No, in
Mm-hmm.
Oaxaca, there's been a lot of work in that. No, and still there are people that are not so open to being reciprocal. No,
Mm-hmm.
um, but then there is a local team and they are always mediating, so it's always important also for that, for people to be mediating there, because if they're just going alone, then it's also,
Yeah.
they don't get what we're trying to do. And in Xochimilco, there's been a lot of intervention as well. Here in Mexico City, there's been a lot of projects, research projects, but
Mm-hmm.
also agroecological projects, social projects, cooking projects. There's a ton of projects. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of intervention. So a way that we've decided to work in Xochimilco is to create a network of projects that were already on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and also the students and the researchers that are there, they go through like a very kind of thorough immersive process with the different organizations
Mm-hmm.
to even um, start writing their research project in collaboration with these
Mm-hmm.
organizations, so that it's not, I want to research whatever, and something that doesn't make any sense, but it's more based on like the organizations on the ground have been there for 15 years, so
Mm-hmm.
they know, okay, this is something that is a pressing matter right now. Okay, then I will, shift my research towards that, um, in the thought that someone like this organization or like Cocina CoLaboratorio or like a group of farmers will be able to use whatever is being researched after they leave. I think what is also hard, but it's also a bit inevitable, is the relationships that are being built over time, and that at some point need to end because the person is leaving. No? But then we try to make really like a closure, and, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, some people are still in contact through WhatsApp if they have like developed a good friendship.
So I guess like I also heard another sort of interview thing that you did that was on YouTube, and there you had discussed sort of that your methodology is like there's you don't have a very specific methodology that you follow, and it also makes
Mhm.
sense from what you're saying, sort of organic and chaotic, and you just build on it and you start like working on it and creating your own methodology. I guess, is there something that is like under everything that you do, like
Yeah,
even if it's
yeah.
not the same everywhere, because obviously it needs to
No,
change, there is always some
yes.
common.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would be the arenas of
Okay.
exchange and experimentation. I think this is our main methodology, or like our common ground. No, the arenas are like intentionally kind of designed and put together spaces for encounter, that are helping to portray a narrative, to create like a narrative environment, to give the tools for conversations. And I mean, these arenas are mediated by participatory arts, but also they're very spatial, and they're also usually using props, as I was telling you before, no, like little car, a mobile car of seats. It's already like a thing, an image. It's a space that is transient, that is collecting seeds and stories, and that also becomes a placeholder for the exchange of knowledge around seeds. No, so that's like a one prototype for an arena, but like a kitchen table in the middle of a street can also be an arena, no? Or a collective plot, or a food forest can also be an arena. They're all quite spatial, no? Also, we're taking space into consideration. We're taking props into consideration, no? Like designed, no, like objects, or not designed, or maybe just like intentional
Things,
objects
yes.
that help with this. um, and then also we think about like, what's the narrative of whatever is going to happen, who are going to be mediators, what's going to be the what do we perceive that the action is going to be, no, what are the media, and we just let it happen.
It's a little
So
bit like an
yeah,
improvised performance. I don't know if that makes
yes,
sense, because
it
it's
does have a
you have your
performative
props,
aspect.
you have the
Yes,
things, you have a story or a narrative of something that you imagine, and then you just sort of let it happen in the time.
yeah, yeah. There is definitely a performative aspect to it, and actually, I am, let's say, me personally as a design practitioner, have been interested in performative interventions. That's how it's called. Now I question a lot
The word
the word
intervention.
the intervention, no, but that's how it's called in like the worlds of art and like critical spatial practices, let's say. But yeah, like how performative actions can create something in space, in public space. And actually, in the practice of Cascoland, and then I worked with them for 5 years. Um, Actually, one of the initiators of this collective was a theater maker. No, so she is theater maker, working with performance, working with like, you know, this performative approach to engaging people in conversations in different ways, but also how that also, yeah, how that also helps shape. space and relationships that are catering for that space. So I think that's where this comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. That's
Yes.
why our approach is very much like that. Uh-huh.
No, I mean, it makes sense because it's so much easier to talk with people about hard or easy, about anything, if you do it around something and not just like you just go and start asking them questions. This
Yeah,
is sort of a way also that, even because if I did this with you in person, I'd come to a table and I would
yeah.
have images and things printed and give you things. That's why I sort of try to share things with you.
Okay.
In my head, is a similar thing. Is like how I try to do it from a distance. It
Yeah,
doesn't work in the same way, but yeah, it's sort of a material, like an agent that has its own like
yeah.
sort of package, and it comes with it. My sister is also a performative arts person, also in the
Oh,
Netherlands right now. So I'm sort of in both
interesting.
worlds. Yes.
Cool, cool,
um,
cool.
I kind of wanted to shift to imagination, kind of as the last part of this conversation, and I don't know. Looking through your work, I found different instances that I think imagination is relevant, and I think sometimes it has to do with imagining things, like for example, in the simplest sense, like a kitchen when it doesn't exist and we are together and we need to design this kitchen. Another moment, it's also a lot about exchanges and the past and the present. I don't know, how do you see
Yeah,
imagination sort of in your
yeah.
practice? What does it mean?
See, I think imagination is everywhere. But yeah, no, as you say, no, like, um, I think, yeah, as you say, for example, one example would be also like imagining the kitchen, but also like, what happens if you put a mobile kitchen in the middle of a place and
Mm-hmm.
you just start cooking and you start imagining new recipes with plants that are growing in the territory,
Mm-hmm.
then you are already kind of like providing a space for imagination to flow
Mm-hmm.
to, which is like within the daily life, using very like accessible materials,
Mm-hmm.
but it kind of like disrupts a little bit. No, it creates kind of this third space for imagination to happen. I don't know if you know this, like heterotopia, the
Mm-hmm.
the concept.
Yes.
So yeah, I think we try to do that a lot, to open up these heterotopias for then different imaginations to happen, and even experimenting with a recipe,
Mm-hmm.
that's already like opening up imagination. No,
Mm-hmm.
a plant can be eaten in this way. No, a
Mm-hmm.
plant that I see all the time in the forest and that I don't know how to cook it, or that this other person knows how to cook it and it tastes really nice. Taste is also imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when we cook something and it's really nice and people taste, wow, that's amazing, and it just kind of like blows our mind, and kind of opens up new imaginations of like what this plant can be, or like what is the potential of biodiversity. O sea,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one. Um, but the other also is like the imagination of what we can do together. I think also, no, like, so a lot of the process that we have with different people is also to understand the realities first, and like talk about these narratives and put them in a pedestal, but
Mm-hmm.
then also like really have spaces where we can see how things can be different,
Mm-hmm.
like an agroecological plot, or a system of cooperation that doesn't need money, or like youngsters also learning to cook something that is from a past generation.
Mm-hmm.
So like different mechanisms for just like seeing these possibilities in action, I think is also very important for imagination, and to imagine that, actually this can happen because I'm seeing it right now, and actually this makes me think that actually we should be eating more healthy, or we should be cultivating more in our houses, or we should be working more with young people. um, and I think, yeah, I think mostly those parts, and also like the use of these different narratives and props help a lot as well to kind of see things differently and imagine future. No,
Mm-hmm.
imagine future a lot, because sometimes it's very hard to imagine the future, especially also like in our current context,
Mm-hmm.
um, and also to imagine a future that is not only like super depressing and chaotic and going to like towards a cliff, but that there are expressions of hope also
Mm-hmm.
within like small things,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like sharing something, like this thing about the youngsters, like understanding all the diverse stories of plants. And so that's where, yeah, I think that's where imagination plays like a crucial role to imagine also different ways of futures, but also within the present. And
Mm-hmm.
by doing these little gestures, already you're like, oh, this can be bigger, or we can reproduce this more, no?
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
basically, I
it's
see it
super
as you
good.
take something that you imagine for the future and you sort of take it and put it in the present. And
Yes,
there's like a little
exactly,
space that this is happening and it's
exactly,
really
exactly.
exciting in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. Like a micro utopia, you know?
Yeah. Do you think it's more about you? Do you think this sort of imagination already exists in the communities that you're working with and they know these practices and these things and they have the hope for the future because they are more embedded and it's more about changing how other people understand it, or is it also about them and giving hope to them, like is
Mm,
which direction
I,
does it go?
I think it goes in many directions, but for sure there is hope. For sure
Mhm.
there is imagination. But I what do we do find it, and people have said it
Mhm.
to us, that having some people that are from outside looking at things from a different perspective, or like
Mhm.
making them look at things from a different perspective, uh, that they, because they always say like, this is something we do, every day,
Mhm.
so we don't see it as important, or we don't see it like you do because you're new and you're excited or
Yeah.
something like that, no? So they say like, it's nice to see your perspective on things, and from that understand my own perspective. So that's, I think, that's kind of like the refreshing part of also having all these people that come from very different contexts to see,
Mhm.
different thing aspects and complex systems in a place. For sure there are people that are already doing like amazing practices of hope,
Mhm.
no, that they call themselves crazy people. Yeah, that's a norm,
Yeah,
like
it's
all
the
these
crazes
farmers
and the
that,
witches and the yes.
yeah, they always say like, we're crazy but we have to stick together, no?
Mhm.
Especially the people who want to shift to different agricultural practices. I think
Mhm.
farmers can be very tough with each other, no? So
Mhm.
the people who are used to doing agriculture in a more like expansive, like industrial way, think that the people who want to go back to the traditional practices, not using chemicals, being more conscious about nature and health, they think they're crazy, no?
Yeah.
So what is also very funny is that whenever we are working with these kind of people, they always say like, yeah, actually I really like you because you hear me. Everybody else thinks I'm crazy, but probably you're also crazy, so that's why I like you, no?
Yeah.
So the crazy people have to stick together.
I mean, yeah. We're probably all a bit
But
crazy to have. I mean, it's like I think people in general that have hope in situations that are like, or that
yeah,
think about things like that are very different than
yeah,
what is happening right now, what the norm is.
yeah.
People call them crazy. And
Yes, exactly. But then, exactly. So there's like the expressions of hope, and there is
mhm.
the expressions of this radical imagination
Mhm.
already happening, no? And I think something that, yeah, our project does is just to kind of like amplify and bring more excitement, and like
Mhm.
also like uh,
Shift in a way.
contagiar, shift, but also like to spread
Yeah, to
this.
spread.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And also like through, especially through the people who have these imaginations and have this hope,
Mhm.
uh, are always kind of like protagonists as well in a lot of the things that we do, no? And they've
Mhm.
become teachers, and they've talked to other people, and they've, they're also the carriers of their own knowledge and their own hope, and that is quite contagious also for others. So we
Yes.
facilitate that contagion to happen. Actually.
In a sense, what I'm actually trying to do with this project, like what actually I want to do about this, is that I think when people talk about the imagination, and specifically the radical imagination, is a very theoretical, very loose term that doesn't mean a lot of very specific material things. And
Yeah.
what I feel like is that there is a lot of practices that do this thing in very real and action-based and material ways,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they are obviously not the same in different contexts or in different
Yeah.
situations, but this is something that happens actively, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sort of trying to find these ways that this is happening on the ground, and to
Mm-hmm.
start seeing also how can this term, or how can thinking or talking about the imagination more in practice, if it can support something different or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a very abstract. I'm just
No,
sort
of
of
course.
going with the
No,
flow.
it's abstract. Of course, it's abstract, but I think it is very noticeable. I mean, in the expressions of people, or how people are questioning things in different ways, or what drives them. I think that's where agency comes in. No, like suddenly something makes a click because you imagine something, because there is something that gives you an inspiration, and then you start imagining things in different ways, and that's super powerful. No? And not only imagination is a powerful thing because it kind of sprouts in the head, but it creates some sort of arrows, no? So
Yeah, direction.
then direction. So you imagine something and you say like, ah, shall we go that way?
Yeah, how do we go that way?
How do we go that way? Exactly. So also a lot of a lot of our processes have to do with that, like, no, showing possibility, imagining, and then talking. Okay, what do we do? No, do we like this idea? No, or like in Loma Bonita, let's say, by this architecture, no, this public space. At first, we just started cooking, experimenting. A lot of people really liked it. They were very surprised, and then they wanted to start a cooperative, like a women's cooperative, and they want to start cooking with all the ingredients, but also like start restoring like the little parts of their plots, and doing this huge, like, suddenly a lot of things opened, no? And then one day, like, a group of people from the community said, hey, we want like a kitchen space, no, this, like, a space that will stay here because we imagine all these things, and that, that they already kind of imagine a long-term space for to hold whatever we're doing here, because they see a potential for this, not only economically but educationally and health wise. Then it's already like something that's sprouted from this kind of imagination of
Yeah.
cooking and doing and experimenting, but now they want to make it a reality. They want to make it something that is going to last for longer, no?
And I
and
guess
then you and then you materialize it,
yeah, and
no?
it's much more powerful because it sounds like many times you're just initiating a situation and putting something in place, and then it's the people actually that want to do the things, and they take
Yeah,
over, and it's there, and they own
yeah,
it, and they
yeah.
manage it, and it's not you having to tell everyone what they need to do in a way.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, that's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of people also still ask for, for the support. No, like, we don't know how to organize so well. Um, you know, we want this, but we don't know how to do it. Can you help us? So I would say that we are more like, exactly, initiators, but also people who kind of accompany this process in the moments that we are needed, no? Because, for example, in the construction, where we were working with Taller Comunal, this architecture studio, um, a lot of people were I know, no, a lot of processes were mediated by Comunal, and we did a lot of I don't know, a lot of workshops to understand what people wanted from this kitchen, and. But then the whole building part,
Mhm.
it was organized and orchestrated by the community,
Mhm.
and they did so well. And we were like on WhatsApp, and there's like still doing that. And now the community has decided that there's like the services that need to be paid for the space are not going to be paid because it's a benefit for the community. And also some people have started to use it now. It's like a temporary space, so now it's like a little soil
Mhm.
factory. And they've appropriated however they wanted, and now they make like little parties there. That's perfect.
Mhm.
And sometimes I think during my practice I have also learned to let go,
Mhm.
because I think this is very something very difficult for a creative, and also for someone that cares for others and for processes and
Mhm.
that wants to like take care of
Help.
people.
Yes.
You're kind of like a little mother, but also like a creative that wants to control the process, so
I
there's a lot
feel
of control
attacked.
happening.
I feel like you're attacking me personally.
Exactly. No, but then
Yes.
exactly. So then
Mhm.
you you have to learn how to let go of that, and
Mhm.
sometimes things are not going to be like specifically how you thought, or like aesthetically how you wanted, or processes are going to be longer, or people are going to fuck up, and then
Mhm.
they will learn from that and then do it
Fix
again,
it. Yes.
and you
Mhm.
don't have to be there for every single part of the process, because I do think, and this is maybe a learning from last year, and like, or maybe 2 years ago,
Mhm.
that if there is a spark already, you can accompany a process without having to be there all the time, and
Mhm.
like taking care of every single aspect of the process, because that's the only way that people actually tend to appropriate things, and they will appropriate in their own ways, and that's
Mhm.
perfect.
Yeah,
That's
that's the
fine.
point of it after all.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I guess if there, I don't know, I don't know, what do you see as like the biggest like value, or in a very academic way, impact of the types of projects that you're doing? Like, what do you think is the thing that is the most important thing that comes out of them?
In an academic way,
No,
like
no, in any way. I
like in
just
a
meant the
theoretical.
word. I mean the word
Ah,
impact, because they. It's like they always try to, in a way, quantify the quality that some project has.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, many times also as an architect that works in this sort of projects, everyone always asks, why are you doing this? What are you achieving?
yeah,
There is
yeah.
no building, there is no this. So I
No,
always like to
exactly.
ask what you think that is the most valuable thing that your
Yes.
projects are giving.
Yeah, yeah. I think, like, first of all, is the opportunity of people, like giving the opportunity, or like setting the space for people to rethink and reimagine the
Mhm.
reality, which maybe wouldn't happen if these spaces were not facilitated, or like not in this way,
Mhm.
and not in contact with different people.
Mhm.
The other thing is this opportunity of like giving tools, but also creating the infrastructure for people to understand that they can change things.
Mhm.
um, Again, not only the community, but also all the participants in the project.
Mhm.
Um, and also, I mean, just more practical material things, like, for example, people are shifting the ways that they see food, no, like,
Mhm.
or that they produce, and that they cook, integrating more like biodiverse diets, regenerating soils, no sé, like all these
Yeah.
little material
Mhm.
practices that are maybe in a micro level, but that, these tend to expand, no, and
Mhm.
tend to be contagious. So I think that's also something. But in general, I do think it's about, yeah, like allowing for different perspectives to shift. So there's also something that has to do with a more kind of like internal process. Um, and not only individual perspectives, but also perspectives of collectivity, and of working together and of creating a family for for taking front into the problems that we face today, and that we're not
Yeah.
alone. So I think, yeah, definitely that. I mean, in an academic way, I would say we do have a theory of change. I can send it to
Okay.
you.
Oh, I would love to see that.
Yeah, we have one. I will send it to you because that's like it's much more structured. We have to be very consistent with our funders
Yeah, that's
to show
and
our impact. I mean, now I'm saying things very poetically, but it's actually much more like boom.
yeah. No, it's always interesting to see and one of I don't know. From seeing a lot of people and how they talk about change and how they try to sell themselves, not sell themselves, but like show the impact of their projects to funders and to academia. I don't know, I always find that sometimes they tend to use things to value and measure themselves that are a bit against what they're trying to do. I don't know if
Yeah,
that if that makes sense. So
yeah.
people that are completely anti-capitalist and do things like that, then suddenly they try to quantify how much money people would this project sort of gave to the local economy or something like that. So I'm like a little bit, I'm not sure this is the best way to talk about the sort of value and impact that your project has.
Hmm. See, no, definitely no. I mean, our theory of change does not have to do with how productive it becomes. And we have also questioned very much the quantitative ways of approaching impact, even though some funders do want us to show how many families were involved, how many people were involved, how many this and that were involved, no? Este, we try not to make that our main impact driver, no? Um, we do have some like in the quantitative sense, which is maybe important for us, is like how many new groups were formed. And actually, you can only say like one or two per site, but it's 3 years.
Yeah.
But for example, we do value very much like the autodetermination of these groups as well, no? To create plans and to put them forward. So maybe like a group of women want to start a cooperative because they started experimenting in the kitchen with local ingredients. So they already formed a group. That's one impactful thing. But then they also want to learn more about how to make a certain product and like to commercialize it. So they're learning by themselves, but we're also kind of helping them, and they're organizing, no? So that's also for us, that's like an impact already because they were kind of inspired enough to start
To
this.
start something, yes.
Exactly. So, and it doesn't matter if this will retribute to 1,000 euros per year or something, or 10,000. I mean, yes, we do live in capitalism, and yes, people do need money, and the food system is also very much transactional. Um, but I think it's like more than that, we do base on the concept of sovereignty as well,
Okay.
no? Sovereignty and exchange. The capacity also to be self-sustainable, but also to have a network that can allow for um, mechanisms of containment, no? So that you don't depend always on what is like in the supermarket, but that you can have your own food. Like, for example, there was a researcher that was doing a project with farmers about what happened during COVID-19 and what were the main challenges in the food system. And I mean, most of it was that shops were closed, the community was closed, and there was not so much access to food, no?
Yeah.
So then she also did like then mapped strategies and like created or like kind of mediated the space to create strategies like, okay, what we should be, or like what do we think we should be doing to not be so vulnerable to these kind of things, no?
Yeah.
Just like especially
It's about
taking care of the
resilience
food.
in a way.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
exactly. It's about resilience and not so much about economic value.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I think it's mostly these kind of small expressions that can make people more resilient within our system and within our in our
Mm-hmm.
current context and also towards the future. Um, and for sure, at some point, the economical aspects will come through,
Yeah.
but I don't think that will be any like impact driver
Mm-hmm.
for
I
us. No.
I wanted to ask you because I'm sure it's not easy to do this work. It's definitely not the most profitable. There is a
No.
lot of struggle to continuously find funding and to be able to do this thing. So in a way, like
Yes.
what keeps you going? Like what makes you like continue? Like this is what I want to do, and I'm gonna continue doing this.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's been personally super enriching.
Mm-hmm.
I learn something every day. I love to see different perspectives of different people. I'm a very curious person,
Mm-hmm.
and like personally, this makes me very wholesome to learn from people, to learn from context, and also makes me wholesome to know that I'm doing something. Like sometimes I had this feeling like I was working for some like architecture and design
Yeah.
studios, and was like, fuck,
Yes, I don't want to do
the
that.
world
This.
the
Yeah.
world is collapsing, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
here like looking at chairs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what am I doing? No? And it made me very sad and very anxious. So I've always been a little bit of like an activist. When I was a student, I was like organizing a lot of marches and like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
more like involved in politics. I somehow also understood that we cannot ask for our governments to give us, like what we need for a change, and that we need to put the things into our own hands.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to do something like this, that even if the changes are little, if it's only like an inspiration, if it's, creating nexus with people that think alike,
Mm-hmm.
it's already so fulfilling, because I feel like I'm doing something,
Mm-hmm.
slowly but doing something.
Yes.
And I find it that, sometimes I have a lot of friends that work like in offices, or like in a conventional job. Maybe they're earning a lot of money, but they're all very confused and quite empty sometimes. Like, oh, I need to find a meaning or something.
Mm-hmm.
And and for me, it's my meaning, and I'm happy with it. And I, like, fortunately, even though this practice is not like super, I'm not gonna become rich with it. These are not the things that I pursue.
Mm-hmm.
Este, Fortunately, we have secured, you know, financial structure for the project. That people that are working in the project have a salary.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not like the best, no, but because also it's. I mean, I did a lot of voluntary work
Yeah.
before, and it's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's important that we do have a structure of like caring economically for everybody that is involved.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but yeah, I think for me it's more this, like, making things happen and understanding that people also want to change things, and like feeling like we're collaborating to something.
Okay, I think I will ask my last question that I like to ask sort of everyone, and it's like if you, let's say, close your eyes and you woke up, I don't know in how many years, up to you, it doesn't really matter, and it all sort of all the things that you would like to happen, or some of them, they worked out, and they, what does that look like?
Yeah.
What is it that is different in the world in your future?
Okay, in my future, I would say that the ways of production are different, are
Mm-hmm.
more decentralized. The kind of the way that we see work and production and consumption are
Mm-hmm.
a bit, yeah, less about being uh, consumers, but more about being kind of reciprocal, maybe producers, and trying to find ways in which our social systems are more connected towards that. So
Mm-hmm.
more solidarity, more caring, less competitive, no, more more attached to nature, to place. Oh, this is all very utopic, eh?
Yes. No, but like I feel like you have to have this vision for the future.
Yeah,
Like you have to think
yeah,
that some of this might
self-organized.
be possible, at least
Yeah,
a bit of
exactly.
it, so you move
Yeah,
towards it at some point.
exactly. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And also that, that we have a bit more time to see, or like to get engaged in actually producing the things that are nurturing us, no, like
Mm-hmm.
food, but also the spaces that we live in, that we are not only like subject to some like bigger system that is designing things for us, but
Mm-hmm.
that we can take a responsibility and take part on like creating our worlds much more, and I don't know, I mean, i i i I really don't believe in like the democratic system anymore. And I think that maybe we should be having like societies that are more like maybe close communities or
Self-organized.
communities of communities, more
Mm-hmm.
like a mycelium kind of structure of cooperation. That would be interesting to see.
Yes, definitely. The Confronting Radical Imagination conversation series is hosted, written, researched, and edited by Lara Sharf. The conversation series is part of the Radical Spatial Futures project, funded by the ESRC, supervised by Professor Doina Petrescu and Dr. Tanzil Shafiq at the School of Architecture of the University of Sheffield. Special thanks to Marianna Martinez Balvanera and Cocina CoLaboratorio for joining the conversation. Follow their work on their website, Instagram, and Facebook. To follow the RSF project, check radicalspatialfutures.com or Radical Spatial Futures on Instagram and Twitter. Playing in the intro and outro is Fairy Tales by Daniel Zambo. Thank you for listening.